The photos were still there on February 2nd. Hiking trails, family gatherings, a couple living an ordinary life documented on a public Facebook page the way millions of American couples document theirs. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious, nothing that would attract a second glance under any other set of circumstances. Then investigators came to the house. They spent 2.5 hours inside. They examined the septic tank. They carried evidence out in brown paper bags. And at some point during that period, or shortly after it, the photos of Tomaso Chioni disappeared from Annie Guthrie's Facebook page. Not all of them. One remained. The rest were gone. The question that nobody seemed to be asking directly was a simple one. When did that happen? And the answer to that question changes everything about how we interpret what followed. Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old. She lived in the Catalina Foothills neighborhood of Tucson, Arizona. On the evening of January 31st, 2026, she had dinner with her daughter, Annie, and her husband, Tomaso Chioni, at their home. After dinner, Tomaso drove her back to her house. He confirmed she arrived safely, he left, and by the following morning, she was gone. Her family reported her missing on February 1st after she failed to appear at church. Her family described that absence as completely out of character for a woman who kept her routines with consistency. What investigators found at her residence changed the nature of the case immediately. Blood was discovered at the scene. Doorbell camera footage captured a masked individual near her home in the hours following her arrival. The Pima County Sheriff, Chris Nanos, stated publicly that he believed Nancy had been abducted. Evidence recovered at her residence, according to authorities, indicated she had been taken against her will. This was not a routine missing person case from the moment it was reported. And then another element entered the story that made it something different entirely. Nancy Guthrie's daughter, Savannah Guthrie, was the co-host of the NBC Today Show, one of the most recognized faces in American morning television for more than a decade. The connection was immediate, and its effect on the case was immediate. By the time the story reached national news outlets, it was no longer simply the disappearance of an 84-year-old woman from Tucson. It was a story attached to a national celebrity. And that attachment carried consequences that nobody in the family chose and nobody could control. Every major news network covered it. Every major newspaper covered it. It trended on social media within hours of the first reports. Missing person bulletins circulated nationwide. And because of Savannah's platform and her public profile, this case received a level of national attention that most missing person cases in the United States never receive in their entirety. That attention was not distributed evenly. It fell heaviest on the people closest to the case. Annie Guthrie had not asked to become a public figure. She was Nancy's daughter. She had been at the dinner on the evening of January 31st. She was one of the last people confirmed to have seen her mother before she vanished, and she was married to the man who had driven Nancy home. That set of facts placed her and her husband directly in the path of everything that national attention brings when a case becomes a national story. She had a Facebook page. It was not a private account. It was the kind of page that millions of people maintain. Photographs shared with friends, family activities documented for people who care about you. Moments of ordinary life made permanent in the way that social media allows. Hiking trips, gatherings, two people living together in Tucson, building a life that looked, from the outside, completely unremarkable. The true crime community does not wait for an investigation to reach a conclusion before it begins its own. These are not trained investigators. They are not subject to the ethical standards or the evidentiary rules that govern official law enforcement. They are people with internet access and conviction, and in many cases, a genuine belief that they are helping.
They arrive on cases quickly, organized into forums and Discord servers and Facebook groups that already exist, already populated, already waiting for the next case to arrive. They archive social media content before it can be changed or removed. They analyze photographs in detail, zooming in on backgrounds and shadows and expressions, looking for patterns that confirm the theories they are building. They build connections between pieces of information that may not be connected, and they assign meaning to ordinary behavior in ways that make innocent actions appear suspicious. A photograph of a man on a hiking trail becomes a subject of behavioral analysis. A family photo becomes a profile entry in a spreadsheet of theories. A smile becomes evidence, interpreted one way if the viewer believes in guilt and another way if they do not. By February 2nd, the true crime community had found Annie Guthrie's Facebook page. They had captured what was there. Screenshots were taken and shared across platforms. Forums discussed the images. The couple's hiking photos were treated as a behavioral dossier. Their family moments were treated as evidence to be examined for hidden meaning. This is what national attention does to ordinary people caught at the edge of an extraordinary case. Nothing they have done becomes innocent. Every photograph is reinterpreted through the lens of whatever theory the viewer arrived with. And then, the photos disappeared. Men's Journal documented what the images had shown in a report dated February 8, 2026. The images were unremarkable. Annie and Tomaso on hikes, outdoor activities, moments of shared life. The kind of content that fills the public pages of millions of American couples without ever attracting the attention of anyone outside the people who know them personally. What was remarkable was what happened after the search. The images of Tomaso on hikes, the shared family activities, the photos that had been publicly visible in the days immediately after Nancy's disappearance, those were gone. One photograph of Tomaso remained on the page, a single image. The rest had been deleted or privatized. That choice, one remaining and the others gone, tells us something that pure erasure would not. If the goal had been total concealment, everything would have been removed, but one photograph remained. One image that said, "This person exists, this is a real man, this is my husband." A single photograph prevents the kind of systematic profiling that a catalog of images enables. You cannot build a detailed behavioral timeline from one image. You cannot identify patterns in something singular. You cannot construct an alibi analysis or a psychological profile from a photograph that stands alone. The decision to keep one and remove the rest was a calculated choice. Whether it was made in an instant of emotion or after careful deliberation, it reflected a specific understanding of what was happening and what needed to stop. Before we look more closely at what was driving that decision, if you are following this case and you want to stay current on every verified development as investigators uncover it, subscribe now. New information emerges regularly. This channel covers every confirmed detail with the same commitment to accuracy and sourcing that you are seeing in this video. 2 days after Nancy was reported missing, on February 3, 2026, a development occurred that changed the public dimension of this case permanently. Ashley Banfield, a former television news anchor who had recently left her primetime News Nation program to focus on her true crime podcast, reported on Drop Dead Serious with Ashley Banfield that a law enforcement source had told her Tomaso Chioni was the prime suspect in the case. Her exact words were these.
My source tells me that Nancy Guthrie's son-in-law, married to Annie Guthrie, Savannah's sister, is maybe a prime suspect in this case. At the very least,
the headline that spread across the internet carried the flat version, not the qualification. The word suspect was attached to a name, and once that attachment is made in a national story, it cannot be fully undone. Banfield described her source as very connected, highly regarded, with impeccable credentials and knowledge of the investigation. She said authorities had seized Annie's car and that there was a connection between the car and Tomaso. The episode was titled, "Stunning New Twist, Savannah's Sister's Car Seized, Cameras Smashed." Those words, that framing, that title, generated an immediate and enormous response. The claim was shared across every platform within hours. It was discussed in forums, repeated in comment sections, screenshotted and archived by people who treated it as confirmation of what they had already suspected. And all of it was happening while the Pima County Sheriff's Department, the lead investigative agency on the case, had explicitly and repeatedly said there was no suspect, nobody named in any official capacity. The distance between what Banfield reported and what law enforcement had said was not a matter of interpretation, it was a factual contradiction. A journalist citing an unnamed source had placed a name next to the word suspect in a national story. The Sheriff's Department had said no such designation existed. The response from law enforcement came 2 days later. On February 5th, Sheriff Chris Nanos addressed Banfield's report directly at a press conference. He called it reckless. His exact words were, "It is really kind of reckless to report that someone is a suspect when they could very well be a victim." He said his department did not have anyone listed as a suspect. He said nobody had been eliminated, but that they did not have enough to say, "This is our suspect." He said, "You could actually be doing some damage to the case, but you could do some damage to that individual too." He did not name Tomaso Chioni directly in those remarks. He didn't need to. Every person following the case understood who he was referring to. Investigators separately told other outlets they did not know where such claims were coming from, but the damage was already done in a way that no press conference could fully reverse. Once a name is attached to the word suspect in a national story, it follows that person into search results, into social media discussions, into the minds of people who hear the claim and never hear the correction. The true crime community, already focused on Annie and Tomaso before Banfield's report, now had what many of them believed was official confirmation of what they had suspected. The speculation deepened, the scrutiny intensified, the harassment escalated. All of it built on a claim that the lead investigative agency on the case had explicitly and repeatedly contradicted. Megyn Kelly, a former NBC colleague of Savannah's, addressed the fallout in detail on her SiriusXM program on March 12, 2026. Kelly stated she had not been able to confirm that the Guthrie family was considering a lawsuit against Banfield, but that she had confirmed Savannah was livid about the report. Kelly said Savannah did not suspect her sister or her brother-in-law. Reports had already circulated as early as February 5th that the family was considering possible legal action. Legal commentators had been discussing the viability of a defamation claim publicly for weeks before that discussion would take on a more specific shape later in the investigation.
All of this is the context in which Annie Guthrie made that decision about those Facebook photographs. She was not making that decision from a position of calm. She was making it in a landscape where her husband had been publicly named a prime suspect on a nationally distributed podcast, where her sister was furious about the accusation, where the sheriff had called the reporting reckless, and where the true crime community had treated a journalist's unverified claim as established fact. Now let us go back to the search itself, because the search is where the timeline becomes important. Annie and Tomaso live in Tucson, approximately 2 to 4 miles from Nancy's home in the Catalina Foothills. After Nancy's disappearance, investigators executed a comprehensive search of their property. The search was consensual. Annie and Tomaso agreed to it without legal compulsion. They did not require investigators to obtain a search warrant. They opened their home. The search lasted 2.5 hours. Investigators conducted a systematic examination of the property. They collected evidence in brown paper bags. Journalists and observers at the scene reported seeing deputies leaving the property wearing blue gloves and carrying bags. A former CIA officer and FBI special agent who reviewed footage from outside the home confirmed the bags were consistent with standard evidence processing materials. And investigators examined the septic tank.
That detail matters in a specific way that gets lost in the broader coverage. A septic tank examination in a missing person case is not routine. It is not something investigators conduct as a formality on every home visit. It is conducted when investigators are pursuing a specific theory, when they are looking for something that may be concealed in an enclosed and hidden space. The fact that investigators examined the septic tank tells us something about where the investigation had moved at that specific moment. It had moved beyond interviews and record reviews into physical examination of a location connected to the last person confirmed to have been with Nancy before she disappeared. Annie and Tomaso consented to all of it. They allowed the examination. They allowed the evidence collection. They allowed investigators inside without requiring a warrant. These are not the choices of people trying to obstruct an investigation. These are the choices of people who want answers and who understand that cooperation, not resistance, is how answers are found. The precise timing of when the Facebook photos disappeared from public view has not been confirmed in any public reporting. We know the photos were visible in the days after Nancy disappeared. We know they were gone by the time Men's Journal documented their absence on February 8th. What we do not know with certainty is the exact date they were removed. That uncertainty matters because timing reveals motivation. If the photos were deleted the same night investigators left the house with evidence bags, that appears reactive, something done in the immediate emotional aftermath of having your private spaces examined, your septic tank inspected, brown bags carried out of your front door. It reads as a response to an immediate trigger, something impulsive, done in a moment of fear or distress. If the photos were deleted days or weeks later, that appears more deliberate, more considered, something thought through, possibly discussed with an attorney, implemented as part of a longer strategy rather than an immediate emotional response. The closer to the search, the more it reads as emotion. The further away, the more it reads as strategy. But here's what matters more than the exact date. The reasons that could explain this decision exist regardless of when it happened. Understanding those reasons tells us more about what this family was facing than any specific timestamp could. There are 3 explanations that are grounded in confirmed facts, 3 reasons that account for Annie's decision without requiring guilt, without requiring wrongdoing, and without contradicting anything law enforcement has stated about this family. The first is privacy protection. The harassment Annie and Tomaso experienced was not confined to digital speculation. It crossed from digital into physical. True crime creators and independent live streamers began appearing in their neighborhood. They filmed the house. They confronted residents. They treated a quiet Tucson neighborhood like a crime scene attraction, despite the fact that every law enforcement agency working the case had said this couple was not named a suspect or person of interest. The escalation was documented and confirmed. According to KVOA, the Pima County Sheriff's Department attended a homeowners association meeting for Nancy's Catalina Foothills after residents complained about a YouTuber harassing people in the area. The Sheriff's Department confirmed they had received similar complaints from Annie's neighborhood as well. In response, the department increased patrols in both locations. As of May 4, 2026, KVOA confirmed those increased patrols were ongoing. By day 78 of the investigation, Annie and Tomaso posted a no trespassing sign on their front lawn. The sign cited a specific Arizona statute. It was not a polite request. It was a legal warning posted by a family that had exhausted other options for managing what was happening outside their home. When people are filming your house uninvited, when YouTubers are harassing your neighbors persistently enough that the Sheriff's Department is attending homeowners association meetings and increasing patrols, removing photographs from your Facebook page is not suspicious behavior. It is the digital equivalent of posting a no trespassing sign. Every public photo was new material for a new video, a new theory, a new accusation. Every image of Tomaso on a hiking trail could be screenshotted, captioned with speculation, and distributed across platforms to people who had already decided they were guilty. Removing that material did not erase what had already been captured and archived. The internet does not undo screenshots, but it stopped the ongoing supply of new content available for speculation. It created a barrier. It was the act of a family trying to reclaim some measure of control over their own lives in a period when they had lost control of almost everything else. I want to know where you're watching this from right now. Drop your location in the comments below. Tell us your country, your city if you are comfortable sharing. This case has reached people across the entire world, and your presence here, following this story to this point, tells us something about how far this investigation has reached. The second explanation is legal protection. On May 14, 2026, retired FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffin-Daffer published an analysis on X that addressed the question of why Annie and Tomaso were maintaining such a low public profile. Her answer was specific. She used the word defamation. Defamation suits are civil proceedings that allege false statements caused measurable damage to someone's reputation. They are distinct from criminal proceedings. They result in monetary damages, and they are a legitimate legal remedy when someone's reputation and livelihood have been harmed by statements that are demonstrably false. In this case, a journalist had publicly named an innocent man as a prime suspect on a nationally distributed podcast. That claim directly contradicted explicit statements from the lead investigative agency on the case. The claims spread across social media, appeared in search results, generated videos, forum discussions, and social media posts naming Tomaso as guilty of a crime he had never been charged with, let alone convicted of. The harm was measurable, sustained, and ongoing. Coffin-Daffer had addressed the rumors directly on April 13th, clearing the couple entirely. She described Annie as a woman who worked hard, had no signs of financial problems, had a beautiful life by all accounts. She said the couple had no involvement in the case. That statement came from a retired FBI agent with nearly 27 decades of experience in federal law enforcement. When she returned on May 14th with her defamation analysis, she was identifying the strategic logic behind behavior that the public had been misreading as evidence of guilt. On the same March 12th Megyn Kelly broadcast, where Kelly confirmed Savannah's reaction, attorneys Mark Garagos and Matt Murphy analyzed whether a defamation suit against Banfield could succeed. Garagos concluded the suit would face serious obstacles from anti-SLAPP motions, depending on jurisdiction. Murphy agreed it would face significant legal headwinds. The reason was specific. Banfield had framed her claim as something her source told her, not as a personal assertion of fact. A journalist who attributes a claim to a source is in a different legal position than a journalist who states the claim as their own conclusion. That framing, standard practice in podcast journalism, provides a layer of legal protection that makes defamation claims difficult to sustain. But the viability of a formal suit against Banfield is separate from the broader legal strategy Coffin-Daffer was identifying. Families preparing for potential defamation claims do two things simultaneously. They document damage meticulously. Every false accusation saved, every screenshot of a post claiming guilt preserved, every link to a video naming them as a suspect archived, every lost opportunity recorded, every professional or financial consequence of the false narrative cataloged, every piece of harassment documented, every canceled appearance noted. All of it becomes the foundation of a damages calculation if litigation proceeds. And, at the same time, they reduce the material available for new false statements to be built on. They minimize their digital presence. They curate what is publicly accessible. They stop providing content that can be misinterpreted or weaponized by people who have already decided they are guilty. Annie removing Tomaso's photos from Facebook fits precisely into the second track. A photograph that no longer exists on a public platform cannot be captioned with a false accusation. An image that is no longer publicly
accessible cannot be incorporated into a video naming someone as a suspect. Removing the photos does not erase what has already been done with them. It prevents new damage from being built on them. Think about what that means concretely for this family. Tomaso Chioni played bass in a local Tucson band called Early Black. According to Coffin-Daffer's May 14th analysis, band appearances stopped after Nancy disappeared and after Banfield's accusation.
Those are documented lost engagements, a measurable change in professional activity that can be connected directly to the public accusation. Coffindaffer also noted that Tomaso was no longer listed as a teacher at his school for the current school year. Whether he took leave or whether the school distanced itself from the false narrative that had attached his name to the word suspect, that change in employment status is itself documented damage. Annie Guthrie is a jeweler and writer. If her business activity declined during this period, that is documented financial harm. If the couple could not move freely in their own city without being filmed, confronted, or accused, that is documented psychological harm. If their neighbors were harassed and their community relationships were strained, that is documented harm to their standing in the community where they live. Every no trespassing sign is evidence. Every KVOA report of increased police patrols in their neighborhood is evidence. Every canceled band appearance is evidence. Every day of withdrawal from public life is evidence of a measurable change in how they were able to live before and after the accusation was made. Coffindaffer said something in that May 14th analysis that captures the entire logic of the family's behavior. The entirety of how they have been damaged will be considered if a suit is lodged. They are not hiding, they are building a record. The quieter they stay, the more deliberately they curate their public presence, the more effectively they reduce the ammunition available for new false accusations, and simultaneously, the more clearly they document the cumulative cost of what has already been done to them. Every piece of their behavior since February 1st, interpreted by much of the public as suspicious, is actually consistent with a family following the advice of counsel in anticipation of potential legal action. If you have stayed with this video to this point, if you have watched this far because you want to understand the truth about what happened and what this family has been living through, drop a comment right now. Tell me you are still here. Tell me what part of this analysis changed the way you were thinking about this case. Tell me what question you still have. Your engagement drives this work. Your willingness to stay through the analysis rather than the speculation matters. The third explanation is investigative guidance. Law enforcement routinely advises family members in active, high-profile investigations to limit their social media activity and reduce their digital presence. The reasons are practical and legally straightforward. Public statements can be misinterpreted or weaponized by people seeking to build alternative theories. Information shared online can alert potential suspects to what investigators know or what the family knows. Digital content can complicate investigative strategy by creating a public record that interferes with the way the case is being managed. Visibility can attract the kind of harassment that creates security concerns for the family and operational complications for investigators. At the point when the consensual search was conducted, the investigation had clearly moved from preliminary interviews into active physical evidence gathering. If investigators during or after that 2.5-hour search advised Annie and Tomaso to reduce their digital footprint while the case remained active, that advice would have been standard practice. It would have been consistent with how law enforcement manages family members in comparable situations. This explanation requires no guilt. It requires only an understanding that practical protective advice is routinely given in cases like this, and that following it looks to people who do not know it was given like something it is not. 3 explanations: privacy protection, documented by confirmed harassment and confirmed increased police patrols; legal protection, identified by a retired FBI special agent with nearly 3 decades of federal law enforcement experience; and investigative guidance, consistent with standard law enforcement practice in active, high-profile cases. None of them require guilt. All of them are grounded in confirmed facts. All of them are consistent with everything law enforcement has actually said about this family. And law enforcement has been clear. On February 16, 2026, 2 weeks after Nancy disappeared, Sheriff Chris Nanos issued a public statement about the family that went further than anything said at a press conference. He said, "Not one single person in the family is a suspect. The Guthries have done nothing but been 100% cooperative with us. They have done everything we asked. We have taken their phones and their computers and their homes and their cars and talked to them at length. Look, they are victims. They are not suspects." He then addressed the media directly with words that carried both authority and visible frustration. "I'm telling everyone effective today, you guys need to knock it off. Quit. People are hurting. They are victims. I'm saying they are clear. We have cleared them." He later told NBC News in a text message why he felt compelled to make that statement publicly. His answer was this: "Because sometimes we forget we are human and we hurt, and kindness matters. It's every cop's duty to stand up and be that voice for our victims. I'm not going to sit in silence when others are attacking the innocent." Think about the significance of that statement. A county sheriff, in the middle of a high-profile, active investigation, took an unusual step to publicly defend a family against media and public accusations. He used his official platform to say, "Stop." He used his authority to say, "These people are victims, not suspects." He expressed personal frustration at the continued harassment of people his investigation had already cleared. Sheriff Nanos made that statement because he had done his job and the public had not listened to the results of it. He had investigated, he had cleared the family. The investigation had continued without them as subjects of suspicion, and the public, with screenshots and theories and the certainty that they had identified what investigators had missed, had continued to treat them as guilty. Coffin Daffer's April 13th analysis had said the same thing. No involvement, no signs of financial motive, a family living well, working hard, with no evidence connecting them to what happened to Nancy. According to former SWAT team leader Chad Lays, who discussed the case on the Megyn Kelly program, Tomaso Chioni and other members of the Guthrie family passed polygraph tests. Polygraph results are not admissible in most court proceedings because of questions about their scientific reliability, but they are one documented component of a comprehensive investigative process. He submitted to the test. The result was reported as passed. The couple's vehicle was taken into evidence and examined, standard investigative practice in cases of this nature. The examination produced no public findings that changed the investigative standing of the family. No law enforcement agency at any point named Annie Guthrie or Tomaso Chioni as a suspect or person of interest. When the deletion of those Facebook photographs is placed in this context, it looks fundamentally different than it does in isolation. It does not look like concealment. It does not look like the action of guilty people destroying evidence. It looks like the choice of a family that had been publicly accused without evidence, harassed in their own neighborhood to the point requiring increased police patrols, forced to post legal warnings on their front lawn, and watching their names become subjects of online theories that law enforcement had already contradicted. It looks like a family trying to protect itself, not from investigators, from the public, because the public, with screenshots and theories and the certainty that they had identified what investigators had missed, had become a force that law enforcement could patrol around but could not stop entirely. The deletion of those photographs was not the act of people concealing guilt. It was the act of people erecting one more barrier between themselves and a world that had decided, without evidence and against the explicit statements of every law enforcement official working the case, that they were responsible for something they did not do. Nancy Guthrie's disappearance remains an active investigation. Law enforcement remains committed to finding answers. The combined reward for information stands at $1.2 million, offered by multiple parties who believe Nancy can still be found. If you have information about what happened to Nancy, contact the FBI tip line at 1-800-CALL-FBI. That's 1-800-225-5324. Or submit tips online at tips.fbi.gov. A woman is still missing. Her family is still waiting. If you know something, you have a responsibility to come forward. The investigation continues. What is confirmed is this: Nancy Guthrie disappeared from her Tucson home in the early hours of February 1, 2026. Evidence at the scene indicated she had been taken against her will. The Pima County Sheriff believed she had been abducted. No arrest has been made. No suspect has been officially named. What is also confirmed is this: the people closest to her, the family members who were with her on the evening before she vanished, have been investigated thoroughly. Their phones and computers and vehicles and homes have been examined. They submitted to polygraph testing. They consented to every search investigators requested. And they have been cleared explicitly and publicly by the sheriff of the county leading the investigation. The question that remains is not about that family. The question that remains is about a woman who was 84 years old and living her life in a foothills neighborhood of Tucson, who had
Dinner with her daughter on a winter evening and was taken sometime before morning. Who took her, where she went, whether she is still alive, those are the questions this investigation is still trying to answer. And until they are answered, everything else, every theory, every accusation, every screenshot analyzed on a forum, every podcast episode titled "Stunning New Twist" is noise surrounding a silence that only one set of facts can fill. The facts of what actually happened to Nancy Guthrie. Thank you for watching this story all the way through. Your engagement with these cases, your willingness to follow the evidence rather than the speculation, your presence here, it matters to this work. Subscribe if you want to stay current on every verified development as this investigation continues. Share this if you know someone who has heard the theories and needs to understand the confirmed facts. And if you are ready to support this channel directly, consider joining our membership for early access, exclusive content, and direct connection to this community. The story is not finished. It will not be finished until Nancy Guthrie is found.